crash in the green hell. The storm had been following the shuttle for hours. Thick clouds covered the sky, and green lightning flashed across the alien atmosphere. Jackson Ray sat at the control panel, trying to keep the small ship steady. His hands were shaking. He was just an engineer, not a pilot. This was supposed to be a simple mission. Land, scan the area, go home. But something had gone wrong. Warning, engine failure. The computer said in a calm voice that didn't match the panic Jackson felt. "No kidding?" Jackson shouted, pressing buttons, trying anything to stop the drop. The ship shook harder. Alarm screamed. The ground came too fast. 1 second, the sky was full of fire. The next, everything turned green and dark. Then, impact. When Jackson opened his eyes, he was lying in something wet. Thick mud clung to his clothes. Smoke rose from the wreck behind him. The shuttle was half buried in the swamp water. Sparks jumped from broken wires. He coughed and sat up, holding his side. Pain. His leg was bleeding. Not too bad, but bad enough to slow him down. His helmet was gone. The air was heavy, full of strange smells, like wet leaves, rotting meat, and something sharp he couldn't name. Thick trees surrounded him, their trunks twisted like bones. Vines hung low, brushing his arms as he tried to stand. "Hello?" he called out. Silence. His radio was dead. The emergency beacon was smashed. No one was coming for him. He was alone. Or was he? He turned, and for a moment he thought he saw something move behind the trees. A shape. Large. Not human. He stared. Nothing. Just shadows. Then he heard it. The sound of breathing. Not his. Low. Slow. Watching. Jackson took a step back. The mud pulled at his boots. He grabbed a broken metal pipe from the wreck and held it like a weapon. "Stay back," he said. His voice trembled. The swamp didn't answer. But something else did. A growl. Deep and long. Then from the mist, she came. At first, Jackson couldn't understand what he was seeing. She was tall. Taller than any human woman. Her skin was dark green, almost black, with patterns that looked like scales. Long hair, wet and tangled, hung over her shoulders. Her eyes glowed softly, golden in the shadow. She wasn't wearing armor, just pieces of cloth, leather, and bone. She looked wild, powerful, and dangerous. She didn't speak. She just watched. Him. Jackson tried to back away, but the mud held him. She stepped forward. Her feet made no sound. Then she crouched in front of him and sniffed the air. "Human," she said, voice low and rough. "You crashed?" He didn't know what to say. "Yeah, I crashed." Her eyes narrowed. She reached out. He flinched, expecting claws or pain. But her fingers touched his neck gently, then his chest. Her hand glowed with soft light. Something moved through him like heat or energy. "You are mine now," she said. "What?" "Mine," she repeated. "This is my swamp. You fell into it. You live. Now you belong to me." Jackson tried to run, but she grabbed his arm. Strong, firm, not hurting him, but not letting go either. "Look, I don't belong to anyone," he said, heart racing. "I just want to get back to my people. I didn't mean to crash here." She looked at him. No anger, just calm, like it didn't matter what he said. "The swamp decides," she said. "And it gave you to me." "Wait. What does that mean?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into a pouch and pulled out a small stone. It glowed. She pressed it against his arm. It burned, but not like fire. It was deep, like something changing inside him. He screamed. Then it stopped. She let him go. He fell to his knees, panting. The spot on his arm now had a strange mark, like a glowing tattoo. "This will protect you," she said. "Others will know you are claimed." "Claimed?" he repeated. "By you?" She nodded. "Yes. You are not safe here without me." Jackson looked around the swamp. The trees seemed to move. Eyes blinked in the shadows. The air was full of whispers. For the first time, He believed her. The swamp was alive. And now, he was marked. The mark that binds. Jackson sat by the fire the Beastwoman had built with nothing but her bare hands and a spark from her claw. He didn't ask how she did it. He was too tired, too confused. The mark on his arm still glowed faintly in the dark, pulsing like a second heartbeat. He had tried to wash it off. It didn't move. It was part of him now. The Beastwoman, who hadn't yet told him her name, moved with quiet strength around the small camp. She had brought fruit, something that looked like meat, and some thick roots that smelled sweet when burned. Jackson hadn't eaten anything since the crash. His stomach growled, but he didn't trust the food. "Eat," she said without looking at him. "You will need strength." "Why?" he asked. "Are we going somewhere?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked up at the sky, where the twin moons of the planet had started to rise. "Others have seen your fire," she said. "They will come. They will want to take you." Jackson frowned. "Others like you?" She shook her head. "No, others worse than me." He didn't know what that meant. He didn't want to know. But the fear in her voice made something twist in his chest. She wasn't afraid of much. That was clear. But whoever these others were, she feared them enough to keep watch while he tried to sleep. He didn't sleep much. The next morning, he woke up to the sound of her arguing with something, or someone. When he opened his eyes, there were two more creatures in the camp. They looked like her, but more animal than human. Their eyes were red, their teeth were longer, and their bodies were thinner, like they hadn't eaten in days. They spoke in a language Jackson didn't understand. Clicks, growls, hisses, but their eyes kept drifting to him. One of them pointed, said something sharp. The Beastwoman stepped between them and Jackson, her arms spread, her claws out. "He is mine," she said in English. The others hissed. Jackson backed up, but there was nowhere to go. Behind him was swamp water, thick, dark, full of moving shapes. He looked at the three creatures and felt his chest tighten. The taller of the two new creatures stepped forward and spat on the ground. Then it said one word in English. "Challenge." Jackson had no idea what that meant, but the Beastwoman did. She turned to him slowly. "You must not move," she said. "No matter what you see, no matter what you hear." "Wait. What's going on? If you run, they will chase you. And I will lose you." "Lose me?" "This is the law of the swamp. They think I am weak. They think you are prey. They want to prove it." Jackson shook his head. "I don't want to be part of any of this." She looked into his eyes, and for a moment, she looked almost sad. "You already are." Then she turned and attacked. The fight was not like anything Jackson had seen before. It was fast, brutal, and almost silent, like a war between shadows. Claws slashed, bodies rolled. One of the creatures screamed as the Beastwoman flipped it into the fire. The other lunged at her back, but she spun with terrifying speed, grabbing it by the neck and smashing it into a tree. Blood hit the ground. Not red, blue. Jackson couldn't move. He was frozen by the power in her, by the rage, by the way she fought like the swamp itself had given her its strength. When it was over, both attackers lay broken on the ground. The Beastwoman stood over them, chest rising and falling, blood dripping from her arms. She turned to Jackson, and for a moment he thought she might collapse, but she didn't. She walked to him, grabbed his hand, and pressed it to the glowing mark on his arm. "Now they know," she said. "No one will question the bond again." Jackson looked down at the bodies, then at her. "What are you?" he whispered. She stared at him for a long moment. "I was the guardian of this swamp," she said, "before your kind came from the sky, before the poison, before the burning." "My kind? You didn't mean to. But meaning is not what matters here. Only survival." Jackson swallowed hard. He was starting to understand. This swamp wasn't just a place, it was a battlefield. And now he was marked. Not just as hers, but as part of the war. Swamp hunters and stolen secrets. The air was thicker the next day. Not just with heat or mist, but tension. Jackson could feel it in his bones. Something had changed after the fight. The Beastwoman, who still hadn't shared her name, moved differently, now quieter, sharper. She watched the trees like they were filled with ghosts, and maybe they were. Jackson stayed close, not because he trusted her fully, but because he had no one else. He had seen what lurked in the swamp's shadows, and more importantly, he had seen what she could do. They moved deeper into the swamp. The trees grew taller, thicker, curling, toward the sky like claws. Vines hung low, brushing Jackson's neck. Sometimes he swore they moved on their own. "Why are we going this way?" Jackson asked. "Because they will come again," she said without looking back, "but not like before. They will not challenge me. They will try to take you in silence like hunters." Jackson frowned. "Why do they want me so badly?" She stopped, slowly turned, her golden eyes locked on his. "You are human. You carry something. They cannot touch something old." "What are you talking about?" She pointed at his chest. "The mark woke it, the bond awakened something ancient. They can smell it now." Jackson's heart thudded. "Something ancient? In me?" She nodded. "Your kind forgot. We did not." Before he could ask more, a strange clicking sound echoed from the trees. Jackson froze. The Beastwoman held out an arm, signaling him to stop. They weren't alone. 3 shapes dropped from the trees. Not like the challengers before. These were leaner, faster, covered in swamp camouflage, faces hidden behind bone masks. Each held a spear that crackled with energy. Swamp hunters. Jackson stepped back. One of the hunters raised a clawed finger and pointed right at him. "Give," one of them said in a cold voice. The Beastwoman stood tall. "You know who he belongs to." "Not forever," the hunter hissed. "Marks can be removed. Blood can be spilled." Jackson whispered. "Can they actually remove the mark?" "Not without killing you," she replied. Jackson's stomach dropped. The hunters didn't wait for permission. They attacked. The first spear came flying straight for Jackson, but the Beastwoman was faster. She caught it midair and snapped it like a twig. She roared, a sound that shook the swamp, and rushed at the nearest hunter. But this fight was different. These attackers were trained. They worked like a unit, circling her, pulling her away from Jackson. Jackson ducked behind a tree, heart pounding. He watched as the Beastwoman fought, spinning, leaping, clawing, but she was outnumbered. A 4th hunter appeared behind Jackson. Silent. He never heard it, until it grabbed him. "Got you," the hunter growled in his ear. Jackson struggled. The hunter slammed him against the tree. Pain exploded in his ribs. The hunter raised a blade, black, curved, and buzzing with energy. "You don't belong," the hunter whispered. "You were not chosen. You are a mistake." Just as the blade fell, something slammed into the hunter from the side. Not the Beastwoman. A new figure, cloaked in dark bark and moss, taller than the others, eyes glowing white. It moved like liquid shadow, breaking the hunter's arm in one smooth motion. The attacker screamed and vanished into the trees. Jackson stared at the new figure. It turned to him and spoke. "So, you are the one." The Beastwoman rushed to his side, blood running down her arm. She stared at the new figure, surprised. "You came out of the old temple," she said. "I came because he woke it," the figure said, pointing at Jackson. Jackson looked between them. "Woke what?" "The swamp," the figure said. "The true swamp, it remembers him." "But I've never been here before," Jackson said. The figure stepped closer. "Not you, but your blood, your kind, long ago, before the fires, before the..." Skies opened. The Beastwoman looked at Jackson, her voice soft. "You were never just a visitor." The figure knelt in front of him and touched the mark on Jackson's arm. It glowed brighter. A circle of light appeared under his feet, symbols he couldn't read, burning into the mud. "He has begun the cycle again," the figure said. "He will need protection, more than you alone can give. I will not give him up." the beast woman said. Then you must take him to the ruins, the figure said, before the storm beasts find him. Jackson stood slowly. Storm beasts? The figure looked at the sky. Clouds were forming again, fast. But these weren't normal clouds. They moved like they were alive. The swamp was waking up, and it was hungry. The ruins of the forgotten kind. The sky darkened with unnatural speed. Jackson had seen storms before, on Earth, on mining colonies, even on orbital stations, but never like this. This storm had a pulse, a rhythm. Clouds churned in spirals above the swamp like something alive was turning the air with claws. The winds howled with voices, not human, not animal, something in between. The mysterious figure who had saved him, the one wrapped in bark and moss, spoke again, calmly, while lightning danced behind him. You don't have much time, he said. The storm beasts follow scent. They were buried, long ago, but your blood calls to them. Jackson's throat tightened. Why me? Why my blood? I'm just an engineer. The beast woman put a firm hand on his shoulder. Not anymore, you carry something old. A spark. The swamp remembers it. Then tell me what it is. She didn't answer. Not with words. Instead, she turned and began moving through the trees. Come, she said. The ruins are the only place where their eyes cannot see. Jackson had no choice but to follow. They moved quickly, faster than Jackson thought possible. The beast woman led the way, leaping over roots, weaving between trees. The storm followed close behind. Every few minutes, thunder cracked open the sky and lit up the path, revealing flashes of strange shapes above them, creatures flying through the storm, but not with wings. They floated, their bodies made of mist and shadow. Their mouths opened wide enough to swallow trees whole. They didn't scream. They sang. Deep, haunting notes that made Jackson's bones feel cold. Storm beasts, the beast woman said, breathing hard. The swamp's punishment, awakened only when balance breaks. How do we stop them? Jackson asked. You don't, the figure behind them said. You run, and you listen. After hours of running, the forest broke open. Jackson stumbled into a clearing surrounded by towering stone statues. Each one was shaped like a human, tall, proud, with strange symbols carved into their chests. Many were broken, vines wrapped around their arms like shackles. But even broken, they gave off an energy, quiet and ancient. In the center stood a half-collapsed temple. Smooth stone steps led down into the earth. Something flickered below. Dim blue light. And warmth. The storm's winds stopped at the door, edge of the clearing, as if scared to enter. This is it, the beast woman said. The ruins of your kind. Jackson stared. My kind? Humans were never here. No, the cloaked figure said. Not humans, but close. Older. Cousins, maybe. Your blood remembers even if your mind does not. Jackson stepped forward. As his foot touched the first step of the ruin, the mark on his arm flared to life. Symbols on the walls lit up. A low hum filled the air. The temple recognized him. Inside the ruins, the air was thick with memory. Jackson moved slowly, touching the walls. They responded. Lights followed his fingers. The walls showed visions, flashes of tall beings with silver skin and golden eyes, walking through the swamp, building towers, planting crystals that floated mid-air. Then, fire. War. Skyships falling. The beasts in the storm. And finally, silence. This place remembers everything, Jackson whispered. The beast woman stayed close. These were the keepers. They guided the balance of this world until they disappeared. The cloaked figure nodded. They didn't die. They became the swamp. Their minds, their power, their fears, all of it sank into the roots. Jackson turned to face them. And now it's waking up. Because of me? Because of the bond, the figure said. Your mark reopened the door. You were chosen by her, but the swamp sees you too now. Jackson stepped into the center of the chamber. A pedestal rose from the floor, with a glowing stone floating above it. The same glow as his mark. What is this? A memory seed, the Beastwoman said softly. If you touch it, you will see what they saw. Jackson hesitated, then placed his hand on the stone. The vision hit him like lightning. He was standing in a great hall made of crystal. Tall beings, like humans but taller, wiser, glowing with soft light, stood before him. They spoke without words. They showed him the truth. Long ago, their kind seeded the galaxy with life. Not just humans, many species. They didn't rule, they guided. But some worlds grew wild. This one resisted balance. The swamp grew teeth, and in the end it turned on its creators. The storm beasts were born from that betrayal, and now they had returned. Jackson gasped as he came back to himself. His knees hit the floor. He looked up at the Beastwoman, eyes wide. They want to finish what they started, he said. Wipe this place clean. Unless you stop them, she replied. Jackson shook his head. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a leader. The cloaked figure walked forward and pulled something from the shadows. A staff, ancient, metal and bone, twisted together, humming with light. You're not here to lead or fight, he said. You're here to wake them up. Who? The figure pointed to the statues outside, to the forest beyond, to the swamp itself, the old blood, the forgotten kind, the protectors buried in memory. Only your voice can call them back. Jackson reached for the staff, and as his fingers touched it, the storm roared louder than ever. They had found him. But this time, he wasn't going to run. When the swamp speaks, the staff pulsed in Jackson's hand, not like a weapon, more like a heartbeat. It was old, older than memory, older than language. As soon as he touched it, something inside him shifted. Not pain, but pressure, like his blood, was waking up. Outside the ruins, the wind howled again, louder, sharper, but still it could not cross into the ancient ground. Yet, the Beastwoman knelt beside him, her breathing calm despite the roaring storm. Her hand touched the floor as if feeling the pulse of the planet. The swamp is listening, she whispered. Listening to what? Jackson asked. To you, said the cloaked figure, stepping forward. You carry the voice of the first kind, the voice they sealed in blood long ago. Now it's returning. Jackson looked down at the staff. Light crawled along its surface, blue, gold, then green. The colors shifted like tides. The mark on his arm burned, but he didn't pull away. I don't know what to say, he admitted. You don't need words, the figure replied. You need truth. The temple began to shake, not from within, but from above. The storm beasts had reached the edge of the ruins. Jackson felt it in his bones. Something huge was outside, waiting, testing the limits of the ancient protection. Then, a crack. A massive root, thick as a tree trunk, burst through the temple wall. Jackson jumped back. Dust and glowing moss filled the air. The root writhed like a snake until it stopped. Frozen. The staff in Jackson's hand lit up again, and the root obeyed. He reached out slowly, touched it with the tip of the staff. The root pulsed, then twisted, pulling itself back through the wall like a retreating limb. Jackson turned, stunned. I can control the swamp? Not control, said the Beastwoman. But connect. It remembers you. Your kind created balance once. You can restore it, or let it fall again. And if I fail? Jackson asked. The cloaked figure's voice was grim. Then this world dies, and the storm beast will move to the stars next. They left the ruins before the protection collapsed completely. Jackson now led, guided by the staff's pulsing rhythm. The swamp opened before them. Vines moved aside, bridges of moss formed. The path was not random, it was alive, leading them. Where are we going? Jackson asked. To the grove, the Beastwoman said, where the heart of the swamp sleeps, and what happens there. You will speak, she said. And if the swamp accepts you, it will awaken its guardians. And if it doesn't, she looked at him, eyes steady, then it will eat you. Jackson swallowed hard. Great. The grove was unlike any part of the swamp he had seen. It was silent. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just a wide pool of black water reflecting the sky above. In the center stood a stone platform surrounded by broken statues, like ancient judges. Jackson stepped onto it slowly. The staff glowed brighter. The water rippled. The Beastwoman stood at the edge of the grove, watching. The cloaked figure stayed, behind in the trees. You must stand alone, he said. Jackson took a deep breath, then raised the staff. At first, nothing happened. Then, everything did. The sky shattered with sound. The water exploded upward, twisting into shapes, faces, claws, voices. The swamp spoke. Not in words, in feelings. Rage, sorrow, betrayal, hope, memories of war, of cities burned, of creators who abandoned their children, of balance broken, of darkness rising. Jackson fell to his knees, overwhelmed. The staff burned in his hand. The mark on his arm spread up to his neck, glowing brighter than ever. Listen, he whispered. Please listen. The grove grew quiet again. Then the swamp responded. A deep voice, not male or female, but both, echoed through the trees. You carry the voice, the blood, the spark. Jackson stood, barely. I don't know what I am, but I don't want to watch this place die. You ask for what was lost. Why should we return? Jackson looked around at the broken statues, the ruined temple, the scars left behind. Because this time, we'll fight for it. I will. Silence. Then from beneath the water something rose. Tall, glowing, armored in bark and bone, eyes full of stars. A guardian, then another, and another. 10, 20. A whole army rising from the deep. The Beastwoman stepped forward, her eyes wide. You did it, she whispered. But before Jackson could speak, a terrible scream cut through the sky. The storm beasts had arrived, no more barriers, no more warnings. Now, it was war. The storm beast war they came without warning, ripping the sky open like paper. Clouds twisted into claws. Lightning struck the swamp like falling spears. The air shook with the cries of monsters that weren't made of flesh or bone, but mist, shadow, and ancient pain. The storm beasts had arrived, and this time they didn't send scouts. They came in numbers, dozens, hundreds. Their massive forms floated through the air, mouths stretched open in a voiceless scream. Their eyes glowed like dying suns. Trees snapped as they passed. Water boiled. Even the ground trembled beneath their rage. Jackson stood at the heart of the grove, the staff gripped tightly in both hands. The guardians, stone-armored beings awakened from the swamp's deep memory, stood behind him, silent, watching, waiting. You, called them, the Beastwoman said, stepping beside him. Her face was calm, but her body was tense, like a bowstring ready to snap. You called us. Will they fight? Jackson asked, eyes locked on the sky. They will die if you ask it, she said. But they will not move until you speak the word. Jackson's grip tightened. He looked at the guardians, their bodies half covered in vines, glowing with the same light as the mark on his skin. Then hear me, Jackson shouted. His voice echoed stronger than it had ever been. The staff in his hands pulsed like a war drum. You were born to protect this world. Your time is not over. The guardians raised their heads. The storm comes to erase everything, but we are still here. We carry the spark, and we will not run. One by one, the guardians stepped forward. The swamp answered with a thunderclap. The war had begun. The battle was like nothing Jackson had ever imagined. The first storm beast dived. Low, its body larger than a battleship. It shrieked, a sound that shattered bark and made the air bleed. But before it could strike, 3 guardians launched themselves into the sky. They didn't fly. They rose, lifted by the swamp's will. They slammed into the beast with force, that cracked the sky. It screamed again, this time in pain. Light spilled from its wounds, not blood. A second storm beast descended, its body made of writhing smoke and old metal. It released a wave of corrosive energy that melted trees. Two guardians stepped in front of it, arms raised. Their bodies absorbed the blast, then pulsed outward, sending shockwaves through the forest. The swamp itself joined the fight. Roots rose, like spears. Vines snapped like whips. The water formed jaws and pulled invaders beneath its surface. Jackson stood in the center, staff glowing like a sun. Every time he raised it, the swamp moved faster. The guardians fought harder. And the Beastwoman, she was fury itself. She leapt from guardian to guardian, slashing at any creature that slipped through. Her claws sparked against shadow. Her voice rang like thunder, and still, more beasts came. Jackson's energy was fading. The staff grew heavier. The mark on his arm was now across his entire chest, glowing through his shirt. The cloaked figure reappeared, moving through the chaos like wind. "They will not stop," he said. "You cannot kill the storm." "Then what do I do?" Jackson shouted. "Remember what you saw in the temple," the figure said. "They were born from betrayal. They are memory. You must show them a new truth." Jackson remembered the vision. The creators. The fire. The silence. What if the storm beasts weren't just invaders? What if they were trapped, screaming not in rage, but in grief? Jackson turned to the staff and slammed it into the ground. A wave of energy shot outward, clearing the battlefield for a moment. He climbed atop the stone platform again, lifted the staff high. "Listen to me," he shouted, his voice reaching even the clouds. The storm beasts paused. They hovered above, circling, twitching. "You were made from pain, from a time that forgot love, forgot peace. But that time is gone." His voice cracked, but he kept going. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to free you." A long silence. Then, the largest storm beast descended. It hovered above Jackson, its mouth wide, its eyes locked on his. He didn't move. He held out the staff. "Remember who you were." The beast roared and slammed down. Light exploded. Not heat. Not fire. Just light. When Jackson opened his eyes, he was floating. In a space that wasn't swamp or sky. The storm beast was in front of him. But it wasn't a monster anymore. It was being a child, lost, afraid, and it was crying. Its tears formed stars around them. "We didn't want to destroy," it said. "We were left behind. We became rage." Jackson stepped closer, then come back. Not as a curse, but as a guardian. The being nodded. "We will try." He opened his eyes. The sky was clear. The storm was gone. The beasts had vanished. But the trees were alive again. The swamp was singing. And the guardian stood tall. The Beastwoman walked to him. "You did it." Jackson fell to his knees. Not in pain, but in peace. The swamp had spoken, and it had chosen him. "She who guards the heart," Jackson stood at the edge of the grove, his boots half buried in soft earth. Above him, the storm had gone. The clouds, once monstrous and alive, were nothing now but drifting white mist. The sky had returned to blue. Birds called from distant branches. Insects buzzed lazily in the humid air. But inside him, everything was still trembling. The battle was over, and he was still standing. He looked down at the staff in his hand. It no longer glowed. It felt quiet, like it had given everything and now only waited. The mark on his arm had dimmed, but it was still there, etched into his skin like a promise he could never break. The guardians had returned to the roots. Slowly, silently, they had sunk back into the swamp, their purpose complete, for now. They left no words, no farewells, only stillness, as if they had never risen at all. But Jackson knew better. He felt them, and they were still listening. He turned. The Beastwoman was watching him from across the grove, standing tall and still like she had since the very beginning. Her eyes, those wild golden eyes, held something new now. Not just instinct, but understanding. and something else. Something deeper. Jackson walked toward her. Slow. Uncertain. Not because he feared her, but because he no longer knew what came next. "It's over," he said. "No," she replied. "It's only beginning." He frowned. "The storm beasts are gone. The guardians returned. The swamp is calm. For now," she said. "But balance is not a thing you fix once. It must be guarded, watched, kept alive, like fire, like a heartbeat." He looked at her. "And you're the one who does that?" "I was," she said, "until you came." Jackson hesitated. "You think I should leave now?" She stepped closer, and then she did something she had never done before. She reached out slowly and touched his cheek, softly, gently. "I think you should choose," she said. He looked into her face, into the scars, the strength, the wild grace in her, and he thought of everything they'd survived, every step of this swamp that had tried to kill them, every secret that had changed him. He had crashed here as a stranger. He wasn't a stranger anymore. Jackson turned to the swamp, the vines, the trees, the singing water. It was alive, and part of him was tied to it now, bonded. But his mind also drifted to the stars, to Earth, to the people who still thought he was dead. "If I leave," he asked, "what happens to you?" She said nothing at first, then softly, "I remain. I watch. I fight. That is my role." He nodded slowly. "And if I stay? If—" Her answer came like wind through leaves. "You become more than a voice. You become the heart." Jackson's chest tightened. He wasn't ready to be a hero. He wasn't ready to be a symbol. But maybe he was ready to be home. He looked back at her. "You still never told me your name." For the first time since they met, she smiled. Just barely. "Names are for outsiders," she said. "But if you wish, call me what the swamp calls me." "And what's that?" She leaned in, her breath soft against his ear. "Guardian." 3 days later, Jackson stood on the edge of the same cliff where he'd first seen the storm roll in. Now the sky was clear. The swamp below shimmered with life. He'd found wreckage of an old comm beacon barely working, just enough to send one signal into orbit. "I'm alive. Don't come for me. I found something worth protecting." He left it at that. Short final true. When he returned to the grove, she was waiting. Not in armor, not as a warrior, but simply as herself. She took his hand, not as a claim, not as a prize, but as a bond between two souls who had survived a world that didn't want them, and changed it together. They walked into the green, the light filtering down through the trees like stars. And somewhere deep in the swamp, the old world whispered. It remembered them, not as intruders, not as enemies, but as keepers. Together,